are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Thanks for having me back on.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us again, Ian. Once again, we speak to you and it's not necessarily good tidings. Let's start off with exactly what's happened and dive straight into the information.
Okay, well, yeah, like you say, it is difficult to be linear about this at the moment. But yeah, the sad news is, as many people know probably by now, that on Friday the 17th of February, Robert Green received a 1-year custodial sentence handed down to him by Sheriff Bowen. The crimes that he was charged with was breach of the peace and breaking bail conditions. So the 1 year is actually made up of 9 months for breach of the peace and 3 months for breaking bail conditions. So just to be specific, the breach of the peace, 9 months, is basically by after exhausting all possible legal avenues. Obviously, as we all know, Robert went public with the case and with some of the names of with all of the names known to him at the time of the alleged paedophile ring. That, according to the allegations, brought a sense of fear and unease amongst those who were named, and therefore, legally, there was a breach of the peace. Obviously, more reasonable people would look at it and say, well, what about breach of the peace from the point of view of the abuse against Hollie Greig and the other named victims, but the law didn't see it that way. The 3 months for breaking bail conditions are specifically because since being charged with breach of the peace, Robert continued to speak to the public and the media about the case, and basically Robert being Robert simply wouldn't shut up because he knew he was right.
Yes.
So, and an interesting thing also, the 9 months and the 3 months are running consecutively. They're not concurrent. They're not running at the same time. So in other words, it's not 3 months, 9 months and then the whole thing's over. Once he's done his 9 months, he then has to do his 3 months, or 3 months and then 9 months, whichever way you want to look at it. So in other words, they're trying to hold him inside for as long as they possibly can.
Yeah.
So that was handed down to him on the 17th of February, and he was taken from the court to prison. Now, I think before I go any further, there has been some confusion about exactly where he is and what his prison number is and how people can contact him, etc. Well, I can say just before coming on here, I've spoken to his daughter, who is listed as the next of kin for Robert, and what we can definitely confirm now is that Robert is definitely being held in Aberdeen prison, which was formerly known as Craig Inches. So the speculation is that that's where he was, but maybe he wasn't. All that is now definitely confirmed. He is in Aberdeen prison, formerly Craig Inches. We still haven't got his prison number confirmed. So therefore, those people that, and I'll go into writing to him in a moment, but those people that want to write to him, please just hold off. We're hoping that at some point tomorrow, his daughter, next of kin, will be able to get the prison number confirmed, so then we can obviously get that out to everyone, so then you can write to Robert, and obviously he can write back to you and everything. So that was the worst part of it, if you like. I was told that as per the start of the trial, when Robert was initially asked, what is your name? And he immediately said, I'm happy to answer that, provided everybody confirms they're not a Freemason, which ended up with the only person refusing to confirm or deny was Sheriff Bowen himself. This time, just before sentencing, just to make sure they got the right person, obviously people have twins, etc. Normal procedure is just confirm who you are. And again, Robert said, well, I'm happy to do that, but I want it on record that I'm declaring a mistrial, that you, Sheriff Bowen, you are compromised in this position, that you've known one of the key witnesses, Elisha Angelini, for more than 10 years on a professional basis, and you would have to therefore assume to a certain degree privately. And basically, should we say, Robert went into one. The judge, or the sheriff, tried desperately to silence him, but Robert did manage to get everything out and absolutely went for him verbally anyway. So hopefully that's all been recorded as well. And then obviously he confirmed his name. And from what I understand, Sheriff Bowen was not in any way, shape or form pleased with Robert at all, which is why he appears to have been given the harshest, longest possible sentence that he could have received. So there's a few, like you said, it's difficult to do this in any sort of chronological order because there's quite a bit involved, and obviously once the information came out and after people got over that initial shock, wheels put into motion quite quickly. Obviously an appeal will be mounted. Exactly by who, how and when has yet to be decided. An awful lot of the preparation for the appeal was obviously already been done, but the final points need to be put together because we don't know, or we didn't know at the time exactly what the final outcome was going to be. So that needed to be sorted out. But there's quite a bit to consider and a number of approaches to take. What I will say is the information was released regarding things that were going on in the background immediately after Robert was sentenced, and that was at Robert's request that basically, if they do try and shut me up and send me down, I want this document sent out, I want that document sent out. So that was all done. Provided I get the legal clearance, which I'm hoping for tomorrow, then tomorrow, all being well, another document will be released, but that needs to be, up to a point, it could have been released anyway, but there was a minor technicality that needed to be clarified, and we're hoping to get that done tomorrow. If that's the case, then this other document will go out, which is basically another nail in the coffin for the prosecution, really. But so that's waiting, and we're also aware that probably can't go into the details of this, but as you might expect, a number of things are being looked at. And yesterday I was talking to, should we say, an individual, and it transpired that something, I wouldn't exactly say has been overlooked, but with a little bit of effort, some information that is already, and this is actually quite cryptic what I'm saying here, but basically we're hoping that another piece of evidence will be forthcoming very soon. And all of this obviously is building up a picture to show that Robert should never even have been arrested in the first place. Okay. So the whole thing, irrespective of Bowen's involvement, the whole thing should never have come to trial in the first place. But obviously that needs to be clarified in legal terms.
Yeah. Just before you carry on here, Ian, I just want to remind everybody that Robert Greig has actually been imprisoned for a year. Just to get the highlights out on this one, he has been in prison a year, and this happened on Friday. He was jailed by Sheriff Bowen. His crime, of course, was only seeking justice for Down syndrome sufferer Hollie Greig. And this case is monumental as it highlights many miscarriages of justice on so many fronts, and there is so much evidence blatantly in the public spotlight. Yeah, it's unbelievable just how farcical this case has become. And what I can't understand is that through all the attention that it's received, that they actually have they've gone and given him a year sentence. What are we doing, Ian? Are they launching an appeal? When is this going to happen? How long is this wonderful man going to have to sit in jail?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, in talking to Robert's daughter, obviously she's going to be right in the heart of this for a little while. Yes, there will definitely be an appeal. How that comes about and how quickly is difficult to say, because basically, there is obviously some question as to, should we say, not the legitimacy, but the competency and basically the guts of the legal representatives that have been working with Robert, because, you know, he's had to dismiss certain people, other people have bowed out on him. So, you know, it's important that an appeal is obviously done properly. Otherwise, you end up, you know, doing pretty much your full term. Although obviously people can get out on good behaviour, and you know, if it's another thing with Robert. First offence. He's an old age pensioner. First offence. You know, we were genuinely expecting maybe 3 or 4 years suspended sentence. You know, suspended like for 3 years or something. You know, something ridiculous. We would have considered that harsh, and wearing a tag during all that time. But to send him to prison is just, we couldn't. You know, so there's a lot of people in shock at the moment, and so now the most important thing is get the regular contact with Robert, and so therefore the crucial thing is to get his prison number, which will come via his next of kin, his daughter, and once that's done, then people can write to him, and obviously his solicitors can get unrestricted contact with him in prison, and then as more information feeds through to Robert, he's then in a position to decide exactly how to go about mounting some sort of appeal. So he'll request the appeal, and it will have to be considered. If he's granted an appeal, then once things are granted, they usually go through reasonably quickly, because if it turns out that the conviction is overturned, every day that you spend in prison, therefore unlawfully, you're entitled to compensation. So once the appeal is granted, obviously they want to get that done pretty quick, just in case it's going to cost them a lot of money. But therefore the appeal has to be done properly, and that could take a little time. It could be done quite quickly. I know a lot of people are just basically begging Robert, please represent yourself. But at the end of the day, you know, this is not our case, it is his. And we have to respect his decision. He knows this, you know, he's familiar with an awful lot of aspects of this sort of thing, and so we have to respect his decision as to how to go forward with his own case. I will say one thing. Can I just talk a little bit about writing to Robert? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's on that note, Ian, people are actually listening from the UK, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, USA, Turkey, so this is going out worldwide, and they want to know if there is something they can do at all to help this case. So, you know, perfect intro for that.
Well, what I can say is, specifically, sort of directly from Robert, in speaking to his daughter just before coming on here, it was a very, very short conversation apparently, but what Robert did manage to get across to his daughter was, first of all, in the usual Robert Greene way, hey, I'm fine, everything's okay, you know, so he's very upbeat, and
oh, I love Robert.
You know, the classic sort of image that you'd have of Robert Greene, that's still the same, nothing's changed. But he did say, could you get people to write to me? And personally speaking, as an ex-prison officer myself, I will say, whatever you want to send to him, whether it be money or clothes or books or whatever, fine, that's great, thank you very much. However, I can tell you that when people are inside and access to, you know, the real world is heavily restricted, or in some cases, you know, very, very minimal, although I wouldn't have thought that'd be the case with Robert, it can be a very lonely and isolating place. So you could have all the money in the world, but if you haven't got people writing into you and you writing back to them and getting some communication going, you know, it can be very unpleasant. So if people are saying, what can we do, the best thing you can do for Robert is write to him, okay? So with that in mind, should I go through a few things here?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, well, obviously, Robert's in Scotland, and, you know, as we're witnessing daily almost now, the Scottish legal system is basically corrupt to the core. There are, in the prison service, speaking as an ex-prison officer, so maybe I'm biased, but I'm, you know, through observation, the vast majority of prison officers and civilian staff that work in prisons are decent people who are trying to do a good job. There are always going to be the corrupt. So there are a few sort of do's and don'ts. So first of all, when you write to a prisoner, always make sure the prisoner number is on the front of the envelope next to the prisoner's name, and make sure the prisoner's prison number is on the letters as well, okay, at least on the first page. That's very important. If you don't do it, especially with a name like Robert Greene, it's not exactly a rare name, so it's probably going to be 3 or 4 Robert Greenes in that prison, or at least in that vicinity. It may take a little while to get to him. If you put his prison number there, it'll go straight to him. So tomorrow, hopefully, we'll have that number and we can get that out, and everybody can then write to him, which is the most important thing. The other thing here is make sure you number each letter and each page. So in other words, letter 1, page 1, letter 1, page 2, like that. The reason being, if you get somebody who is corrupt, when you write to Robert and somebody perhaps doesn't agree with what Robert has done, if they're that way inclined and your letter comes through and they think, oh, it's for him, right, I'm going to throw that in the bin. If you then write another letter 2, page 1, and in page 1 say, I hope you like that joke that I told you on page 4 of my first letter, and obviously Robert's reading it thinking, what page 1 or letter 1? I didn't get that. So then immediately it's highlighted to Robert, his mail has been intercepted. Okay? So number your letters and number the pages. That helps to minimise the amount of corruption. When sending things like cash and postal orders, you can do that. You can pretty much send as much as you like, really. Please, in the letter, refer to it. So let's say you send £20. If you send a £20 note, refer to the £20 note, serial number, and write it down. And something like, I hope you find it useful. If it's 2 £10 notes, refer to it. I hope you like the £20 note made up of 2 £10 notes, serial numbers, and then can refer to them. The reason being, if you refer to just £20 and the £20 isn't there, well, was it 2 fivers and a 10? Was it 4 fivers? Was it a £20 note? If you can't prove it, well, sorry, mate, you've lost it. Okay? So pin it down, make sure there's no way it can be anything other than what you said. And again, in the follow-up letter, I hope you found the £20 reference or serial number, blah, 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 useful. Make sure he's got a continuous stream so he knows what's going on, and the prison service knows when it comes to Robert Greene, don't try and screw him over, because the people that are writing to him know what is going on. Okay? Things like stamps, envelopes, paper, Robert would have access to that. He would have to pay for stamps, but he can get envelopes and paper for free in the prison service. Obviously, for speed and also to keep money, give as much money to him so he can do things more easily, it will be very helpful if you can send a stamped addressed envelope to Robert if you want to reply from him. And also, if you send additional stamps, that will be helpful as well. But again, refer to the booklet of stamps in your letter, just so that they don't go missing as well. Even if Robert does get a deluge of stamps, they have quite high value in the prison, so you can actually use them for trading for other things as well. So, it's quite useful in that way anyway.
Now, I was actually going to ask you a bit about your recent campaigning about Dame Angelini. If you could tell us a little bit about that, Ian.
Where are we now with that? I've sent off so many documents, I've forgotten where I'm up to with that now. The last thing that I've done is send a letter to the Queen and copied it to the official body, I forget the name of it now, asking Her Majesty, or at least the governing body that deals with this, for her damehood, which was recently given to her, to be stripped from her. The reason being that she is currently, the subject of a CID investigation into the misappropriation of public funds, and also with regards to Hollie Greig's case and the covering up of the case and the persecution of Robert Greene, has engaged, whilst in public office, in criminal activity, and therefore is not suitable to be a dame, or at least not in my view. And I balance that against, I forget the guy's name now, one of the banksters who was given a knighthood and for some time ago, and because of his failings, just being bad at his job, he didn't actually commit any crime, just being bad at his job and the bank failing miserably, and people obviously suffering, losing their business and their home and such like, he had his knighthood stripped. So I basically said to Her Majesty, given that his actions seem to warrant the removal of his knighthood, the equivalent female title is Dame, and given that this Dame is, as far as we're concerned, guilty of criminal activity and is currently under investigation by CID for such criminal activity, I'm asking for her damehood to be removed. Logic would say that should happen. It's the ruling monarch simply bestows the honour. The appointment of it and the removal of it is by the officials. So hopefully they will see the same logic and remove the damehood. And if that happens, then that is, should we say, more credibility and more validity to the campaign and the view that Alicia Angelini has been involved in the cover-up of the Hollie Greig case.
Okay. And of course, just a reminder, this is all a long and involved case which started off with a girl, Hollie Greig, being sexually abused by some senior figures in Scotland, and this is all as a result of a cover-up to stop the people who were involved in this brutal gang of pedophiles from being brought to justice. And of course, Robert Greene is one of the casualties of this. So please, whoever is listening, wherever you are in the world, we will be putting up the details on freedomcentral.info, all the contact details, as well as Ian's information with regards to what to send and what not to send to Robert. So it's all there and available. And obviously, we hope that people from all over the world will write into Robert and show your support. It's absolute travesty, and why I'm so passionate about this case is because we were one of the first people that he gave an interview to after he was arrested and given bail conditions which said do not speak to the press. And he spoke to us, and we of course then went to Edinburgh and met him later on that year and did interviews with him. And I do kind of feel that somewhat involved and responsible, because he did speak to us, and that's part of the reason why he is actually got an extra 3 months, and along with many other people, of course, the other people who were interested enough to take the story further. But I also would just like to point out that we have in fact tried to take the story internationally, and when I went back to South Africa in 2010, I did have a few meetings with various newspapers, various reporters, whoever I could get to speak to from various contacts that I had. And everybody that I spoke to, oh yes, very interesting story, we must do something on it, showed them the websites, everything. And one by one, I always got that phone call, sorry, we're not going to do the story. And, I think people very high up are involved in this, because it seems that newspaper editors in foreign countries are getting a slap on the wrist when even daring to want to do something about this. There's obviously a flagging up system for the story on an international level, which, if you take that into account, is absolutely horrifying. What is this case going to lead to?
Well, precisely, yeah. That is usually the case with, obviously Hollie's case is not unique, unfortunately, but it is probably the most high profile. What usually happens is the low-ranking investigator who, wants to break a major story, so make his career or her career, they'll listen to you and other people and say, wow, that's amazing, give me all the details, and they genuinely really want to push this. They can see the importance of this case, and they, if they were allowed to go forward with it, they would get, the break that they need, basically. However, once they've compiled their report and then hand it over to the editors and such like further up, suddenly it's pulled. What you've just said there comes as no surprise really, and it's not just for Hollie's case. This topic, as you say, it's very important, and for some reason the media is listening to threats, just legal threats, whereas the people are not. And this is, in one sense, what's happened to Robert now has been political suicide and legal suicide for the authorities that are covering this up now, because the people, they've had enough. That's it now. Documents are starting to come out. More is going to come out. There's obviously Anne has her own case, and Hollie, and should we say the gloves are off now. This is ridiculous. I mean, the shock that I'm just speechless as to how they could actually, do that. But I mean, before I forget, but if I could, there was two things I was going to say here. One thing is, I was told by somebody who was at the sentencing that as they took Robert from the dock, and as they say, took him down, he actually said, this is not a direct quote, but was the effect of, "Please tell people, don't worry about me, and please don't argue amongst yourselves." Now, people who, perhaps are not following the various different campaigns may not know what the second part means, and that's fine. Okay, so just keep focused on what you're doing, and everything's great, and just don't worry about Robert, things are in hand. People that do understand what that means, I think that's quite important, because the stakes are high, and the unity is more important now than ever before, and I think personal differences really have to be put aside, because the cost could be very high indeed. So, as usual, Robert's all upbeat. He's always thinking about someone else. So I think, we owe him that to do the same. And the other thing is, this is very important. On the 15th of February, so 2 days before he was sentenced, in amongst some other emails, I got one email from Robert, and part of the email was to make sure that everybody is aware that he is in no way, shape or form depressed or suicidal or anything like that. And a direct quote that I have from Robert, and this is very important, he said, quote, "If I happen to be found hanging in my cell, it will not be by suicide," end quote. So if anything were to happen to Robert whilst in prison, everyone should know he did not do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's very important to make public in. And, if you do speak to Robert, tell him that Holland loves him and we wish him all the love in the world, and we're all rooting for him. This case has just touched the hearts of so many people, because it is just the most vulgar and obscene side of the evil that controls our planet.
Absolutely. And then for me personally, the cover-up, the actual attacks on children and vulnerable adults is one thing. I've never been subject to that. I haven't got a particularly personal interest in that sort of thing. What I'm interested in, and I'm staggered the amount that there is the corruption, the people who have not been abused, who have children, the amount of women that are involved in this, who are very, very happy to actively, willingly and knowingly assist in a cover-up. I'm just speechless.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is, that is the thing that horrifies me the most, is as a woman, you kind of think that, there's a boundary, and we wouldn't condone that. I mean, as a mother, would you honestly ever be in a position to sexually abuse a child? It just doesn't seem natural for a woman, does it? But there very clearly are people involved.
Well, this is the thing. When I was in the prison service, I was talking to some officers, some far more experienced ones than me, and I said I worked in a Category B prison, which is quite high security, and it's a man's prison. And I said, just made a comment one day, it must be a bit easier working in a woman's prison. And they said, "Are you kidding me?" Because when women are sent to prison, but should we say they really should be there, unless of course they're a victim of some sort of corruption, because rarely would you send a woman to prison. And when it comes to sexual crimes, particularly against children, the women who have done that, really, really do need their personal protection in prison, because the other women will rip them to pieces.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Just, you know what? I'm absolutely horrified by the list of people. And to be honest with you, Robert actually never disclosed any of the names and details of any of the people through any of the interviews he did with us, or in the interview he did on our video, or on the radio. And what amazes me is that they can still say that he breached the peace by going to the media, when he actually was so diplomatic and careful not to even mention the names of the people, just saying, you know what, if you want to find them, they can be found.
That's correct, yes. And this is the interesting thing. What Robert had actually done is send a letter to various people involved, one way or another, saying that he will be coming up to Scotland and doing a leafleting campaign. So he had actually alerted the people, again, giving them a chance. Look, come clean, go and hand yourself in, and maybe this doesn't have to happen, because all other legal routes have been closed down to him. Now, prior to doing this is the interesting thing. Prior to doing that, Robert was arrested in February. In late January 2010, the leaflet that was going to be used, which Robert was arrested for, was already on the internet and has remained there ever since. So, in one sense, all credit to the webmasters for somehow just getting away with it. I don't know how they did that. They are supporters of the campaign. But the interesting thing is, if the allegation of breach of the peace causing alarm and distress to the named alleged perpetrators is actually the case, well, why hasn't that website been taken down? Why hasn't the webmaster been interviewed at the very least, if not arrested? There's so many questions here, and yet Robert was intending to hand out some leaflets and he didn't even get to do it. The whole point in Robert being arrested, let's be honest here, the whole point in Robert being in prison now is to send a message out to the victims of these crimes, to the victims of other crimes who are thinking about coming forward, to all the other Robert Greene wannabes, to basically say, you stand up and expose us, and this is what happens to you. They're making an example of him. That's what's going on.
Absolutely, Ian. And that is very obvious. And on that basis, we've got to use Robert as an example in the right way and support him. And please, everybody, do your bit. Please write into him and share our campaign and our support for Robert. There's lots of information available all over the show with regards to this case. And if you can, just share a link with one or two people and try and raise as much awareness as we can about this. It's very important for everyone to understand just how critical it is that we get to the bottom of this case, because on so many fronts the corruption is just unbelievable, and it opens up a whole can of worms that, as Robert once quite rightly said, can literally bring down the Scottish government. And what I find rather interesting as well is that they arrested him before he even got to hand leaflets out, so he hadn't in fact committed the crime yet of distributing his leaflets. It's more like thought policing than anything else.
Well, this is the, like I say, there is something that's being looked at now. I can't say too much about that, but the timing of what you're talking about there is very relevant, and that is being looked at.
Okay, all right. Well, that's an important point. On that note, Ian, is there anything else you want to add before we finish up?
Only to, like I say, reconfirm he's definitely at Aberdeen prison, which was formerly known as Craig Inches. There is no known plans to transfer him anywhere else, and as soon as we do get the prison number, obviously we'll make it as public as we possibly can.
Will he be receiving visitors at all whilst he's in prison?
Oh yeah, unless they... things like that are down to the level of security that each prison operates. As long as they acknowledge human rights, can pretty much run themselves how they want to run themselves. So as long as there's no corruption there, Robert should be at least a sort of normal standard, if not enhanced, a standard prisoner, which means, yes, he should be able to receive visitors. Please note, obviously, people who go up there, you have to make an appointment to see a prisoner. You have to declare who you are and go through the right procedure. Otherwise, there is no way on earth they will let you in. But also, say for instance, he needs to make an important phone call, and you turn up. Even though you've announced it to the prison, you've not announced it to Robert, letting him know you'll be up on next Thursday or something. If he's on an important phone call, he is under no obligation to receive visitors. So don't feel disheartened or whatever, and please don't travel from like the south of England all the way up to Scotland without getting him to say yes, I'd love to see you. Okay, because it may be a wasted journey.
Wonderful. All right, Ian, thanks a lot. And with that, I think we should say goodbye, and we'll definitely speak to you again, Ian. Thanks for your contributions as always, and we'll obviously look forward to hearing from you again.
No problem. Thanks for having me again.
All right, take it, Ian. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.